Hello, everyone. My name is Sahely, and I'm delighted to be here on the third day of the inaugural Cleantech Expo. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're all joining this forum today. For me, I'm in Port Melbourne, and the people that are the traditional owners of the land from which I'm joining you are the Boonwurrung people. So please join me in paying respect to elders past, present, and emerging for the lands on which you're meeting us today. As I say, I'm delighted to be here. This is the inaugural Cleantech Expo, and Global Victoria is very proud to be partnering and delivering this really important forum. We're on day 3, and this is the second session today. Our session is all about opportunities and pitfalls in exporting. We're part of the Thriving and Driving Export session. My name is Sahely, and I'm the Director of Global Engagement at Global Victoria. Part of my responsibility is to manage the network of 23 international offices that the Victorian Government have in key strategic locations right across the world. Out of any state and territory, Victoria actually has the largest international footprint of international offices, and those offices are responsible not just for export, but they're also responsible for facilitating investment back into the state. Vietnam was our 23rd office that opened in January this year, and we actually have a team of almost 100 people on the ground ready and willing to assist Victorian organisations with regard to their export ambition. We're particularly proud of the team that we have abroad, a number of commissioners, and they're a very highly specialised team. We have a highly specialised team here, of course, in Melbourne, and I'm delighted that one of the panellists that are joining us here today is actually our Deputy Commissioner from our South East Asian region. Leigh is based in Kuala Lumpur, but you'll hear from him shortly. Within the Melbourne team, we have experience, we have regional specialists, we have trade specialists, we have relationship managers that are all geared to help Victorian businesses succeed when they do embark upon an export journey. But I don't really you're not here to hear about me. You're here to talk about and listen in on a really important topic, and I can't wait to get into the guts of this. I encourage you to visit the Global Victoria booth just to learn more about what we do. We do actually often get confused with Austrade. We're not Austrade, we are representative of the state. And Victoria really does punch above its weight when it comes to facilitating export. So today we've got 4 speakers lined up for you. First, we'll hear from Patrick Mooney, and I'll come into a little bit of an intro onto Patrick. We'll also hear from Sheila Lunter, Leigh Howard, and Neil Murphy. Patrick is the chairman and co-founder of Impact Tech Ventures. Sheila's the Austrade Commissioner for the Pacific and Timor-Leste. Leigh, as I said, is our Deputy Commissioner for Southeast Asia for the state of Victoria, and Neil Murphy is the Director of Earth Systems and Chair for the Victorian Cleantech Cluster. So without any further ado, I'm actually going to hand over so we can hear directly from Patrick. Patrick's going to talk to us about where are the markets for Cleantech and who are the buyers. That's insight I'm really ready to hear. So Patrick, if you're there, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thanks also to the Victorian Cleantech Cluster for the opportunity to speak. And I'm just adjusting to make sure I'm showing the right screen here. And this expo is really an excellent initiative and a very timely initiative. I think we all know. Hopefully that is visible. Given where we are in terms of the 1.5 degrees of warming and almost daily being confronted, with the challenges of pollution, bushfires, erratic weather, and loss of safe, productive land. And all those issues are not going away while we're immersed in our pop-up, pop-down COVID bubbles. In fact, in many of the parts of the world, we know that they've been accelerating. I've been asked to talk specifically about markers and buyers for Cleantech, and I'll argue that not only are there significant commercial opportunities for Australian Cleantech companies, but progress in scaling those companies globally will help us address at least 7 of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Things like clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, sustainable cities, protection of life below water. And arguably, that success will also indirectly address at least 3 others, like zero hunger, good health, and well-being. So it's a very significant area, both commercially and in terms of impact on communities. So a brief introduction on who we are. So as mentioned, I'm Executive Chair and Co-founder of Impact Tech Ventures. We accelerate Australian technology scale-ups with a particular focus on APAC, where most of the challenges emerging and significant already clean tech challenges exist. We run the Australian Technologies Competition, and we've built up around that a pool of over 200 former tech CEOs and senior corporate people who are very willing to share their time and nurture the companies that come through the process. We've also got a number of very senior corporate connections and with companies that are very active in the clean tech sector. The Australian Tech Comp itself, which is actually open now until the 10th of May, identifies Australian tech scale-ups and SMEs with global potential, and it accelerates the development in 3 ways. So one is really the 3 stages of competition for a national award in their sector, such as smart cities, such as circular economy, such as energy. And there is, in fact, an overall Australian Tech Company of the Year award as well. Companies use that. It's quite a well-recognised set of awards. Companies use that a lot in their own marketing, and the feedback we get is it does help validate their business, their solutions, helps them in their conversations with investors and partners. The second stream is there's very much a collaborative environment built in this, designed to enhance capabilities and confidence. And we do that through one-to-one mentoring. So each semi-finalist in the competition has up to typically 2 of these senior mentors. They have the option to go through a growth masterclass, which is very growth execution focused. So it's designed to complement the very good programs that the accelerators and incubators around the country run on helping to form and structure companies. This is very much about execution internationally. And it involves practitioners. It's very interactive, and we've not had a rating below 9 out of 10 from participants in those programs. The other thing we're adding this year is there will be specialised workshops on what companies themselves see as their big constraints based on a diagnostic that we have. So very targeted support. The third element is that we also run private partner and investor connect sessions with relevant investors, partners and customers in that sector, typically no more than 30 in the room, and they're all decision makers. In the 10 years it's been running, we've had 125 clean tech semi-finalists and finalists. So that's enough about us. I'll talk about some of the pain points and opportunities in clean tech internationally. I've been asked to talk also about who the buyers are, and I'll give some examples of Australian trailblazers, just some. The panel will do a much better job later of identifying the issues and factors for success, but I might just seed some of that on the way through. So where are the clean tech pain points and opportunities in the next 10 years? And you'll see that geographically, this is not to scale in the sense that it actually represents roughly the scale of the opportunity rather than the scale of the country. So clean tech has many dimensions, of course, and one estimate has that the green technology and sustainability market will reach 58 billion in 2030 from just 8 billion in 2019. So very significant growth. I'll be focusing on just 4 key growth areas. So the first one really is energy efficiency. And the UN said recently that by 2030, it wants to increase the global rate of improvement in efficiency to 2.6% per annum compounding. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is significant. And within that, there are some very rapidly growing sectors. So AI and analytics component of that energy efficiency market expected to grow at 22% compound through that entire period. And while there's been improvement in many Western economies, there's also a very large opportunity for efficiency tech in India, Southeast Asia, and Brazil in particular. Secondly, the International Renewable Energy Agency, and it's very topical, of course, what's happening internationally, has stated that the share of renewable generation in the world's energy mix must double to 57% by 2030 in order to meet those sustainable development goals. That's going to require an increase in annual investment from currently about $330 billion US per annum to around $750 billion per annum. So that investment into renewable generation capacity, associated technologies like storage, microgrids, and grid resilience is a worldwide phenomenon, but the opportunities are particularly large in Asia and especially in markets like India, Japan, and China. APAC will represent 60% of global solar generation by 2030. The third area really is water. The FAO has reported the amount of fresh water available per person has declined by 20% over 2 decades. Every year, nearly 300,000 kids die of diarrhea linked to dirty water, poor sanitation. And there's been an 84% decline in freshwater species population sizes since 1970. If you look at India, groundwater levels have been dropping for decades. There are 21 cities, including Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, have been predicted to run out pretty soon. And there's also growing concern about the quality of community water with significant industrial pollution, including arsenic. So major challenge and opportunity for clean tech. The fourth area is global municipal waste. By 2050, sadly, that's forecast to increase by 70% on current trends. E-waste grew from 33 million tonnes per annum to 54 million tonnes in the 10 years to 2019. And plastics waste, we know, has been on a growth trajectory and is causing a significant problem in our oceans. We know the story that at the bottom of Mariana Trench, they've been finding plastic in the bodies of crustaceans. Those significant waste challenges across all geographies are obviously also opportunities for the clean tech sector to provide solutions, and in fact, there's a desperate need for them. So who are the buyers? And each market has a different set of customers and influencers, and this is really skating over the top of it. In energy efficiency, government agencies have taken a lead, actually been very proactive in encouraging emerging technology solutions, and also to reduce their operating costs. And many building owners have also been leaders in this area, and again, driven by cost reduction, but also the desire for higher neighbours ratings and the potential for greater rents as a consequence. And of course, other important groups are engineering firms and architects. They play a key role through the choice of materials that they specify and the design of the buildings themselves. There's been an explosion in intelligent building solutions, including some great Australian companies like Building IQ and CIM Enviro. In renewable generation, in some countries like Australia, it's been consumers that have led by becoming generators themselves. And the global household storage market has been forecast to grow from 6 billion in 2019 to 24 billion by 2024. That's a massive part of that emerging solution. In other countries, it's been industrial and commercial businesses that have led the charge. And we've seen examples of that. In South Australia, there was recently a major IKEA site announced involving planet arc power technology, where they'll generate on site, they'll power a grid for charging your car and running that whole facility, and they'll contribute power back into the grid. The renewable generators, the large-scale ones, are also actively seeking storage tech solutions and other solutions, grid-related, that will let them sell more into the grids or microgrids. They still lose significant revenue from what's called curtailment, where they literally can't find a customer for what they're generating, and that can significantly impact business cases. So that's an important area for them. And the utilities, of course, they're looking for solutions to reduce grid instability because those grids weren't designed to operate two-way, and they're looking for new database, typically revenue streams. So they're very actively looking at how they can use that connection with customers and the data they have. Water markets tend, of course, to be dominated by local government and utilities that are looking for tech to manage supply. and protect what are typically very rapidly aging infrastructure, and also to maintain water quality. While the international agencies like the UN, of course, are very targeted on emergencies, underserved communities, displaced communities due to war or other emergencies. And then within the waste sector, of course, Australia's had to come up to speed very quickly in this area, particularly after China stopped taking much of our municipal waste. The decision makers in those areas, of course, include groups like councils, recycling centres, and increasingly industry viewing waste as a valuable resource and looking to find ways that they can avoid paying the significant landfill charges. We're fortunate through our competition, Sara, to see many great Australian scale-ups in these sectors. I'll just highlight a few to illustrate the diversity. Disposal of end-of-life vehicle tyres is a serious environmental challenge, particularly in emerging economies. There are mountains of stored and dumped tyres around the world subject to the risk of fire. One such fire started by arsonists in Wales, burned for 15 years and consumed 10 million tyres. It's not rocket science that what they're releasing is not good for any of us or other creatures for that matter. And GDT has developed a non-toxic technology that converts tyres at scale into usable materials like rubber, steel, carbon black and oil, and is doing very well in the UK and USA, has MOUs for more than 20 plants in advanced discussions with tyre companies, and we know has significant interest in Asia, where that is a particularly significant problem, countries like Indonesia. De-stressing the grid, the rapid growth of renewables has been great news, but the grids aren't designed to cope with two-way solutions. And Future Grid, another Victorian company, has put processing capacity at the edge of the grid so that 90% of the decisions can be taken at that local level to adapt to variable production, to faults and other operating decisions at the local level. So it's de-stressing the main part of the grid. A winner of the Austrade Cup in 2015 was Calyx. It's now a listed company, and they've developed a set of environmentally friendly technologies for wastewater treatment, biogas management, lake remediation, crop protection, carbon capture. And in this example, it's a foliar spray, which has no toxic byproducts, doesn't cause problems for the farming neighbours, but it enhances productivity. So it's a safe form of improving productivity, which the industry has been desperately in need of. And then, of course, we hear a lot about the circular economy. How do we implement that in practice? A spin out from the CSIRO, Aspire enables businesses to identify relevant waste inputs and also customers for their own waste, and facilitates a marketplace. So that's it has attracted significant interest in Asia. We know in Hong Kong and China in this. So the panel will go do a much better job on some of the factors for success. I'll just pick out a couple of these. One is to spend time choosing right markets and customers, and you'll hear from the experts on the panel how to go about that. Absolutely understand local use cases. They're almost always different to the Australian use case. So you've got to adapt your business model and be aware of that and get very close to how it's actually used in practice. With partners, do your due diligence. Make sure there's a clean win for all the parties, so there's no incentive to undermine the partnership. Find shortcuts and communicate excessively, far more than you would in your own domestic environment here, to build confidence, to overcome language issues, and to reassure partners that you really are on the same team. It may seem excessive, but it's a good investment. And we do need to build more cultural IQs here in Australia. We don't tick many boxes in terms of language or culture, and we are not leveraging migrant skills and understanding of how to approach this as much as we should. And one other little tip, retain veto rights on some local decisions with offshore operations, choice of people, choice of inputs, so there's no substitution and impact on quality. And in this world of COVID, having flexibility in your supply chains, you've always got a plan B, very important. So in summary, there are significant opportunities for Australian Cleantech, particularly in Asia and in water, energy, circular and waste. We've got some great companies in these areas, and you can contact us if you'd like to know about some of those. Please do your homework, and we do need to upskill the way we approach partnerships in the region and our skill sets linguistically and culturally. So good luck with that, and I'm very much looking forward to the panel. Thank you.
Hey, I'm back now. Patrick, that was fabulous. You were incredibly generous with your insights. You gave us such a thorough overview of where the opportunities lie. And, you know, I was quite shocked. You know, we do need to remember that we are learning from the past and some of the disasters. I mean, recently I was talking to someone who said to me that, you know, the conversation about sustainability and cleaning up our environment, it's just no longer a question. It has to happen. It has to happen now. So you have given us such a thorough and practical overview on what the opportunities are. And as I say, you were incredibly generous with your insights. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
And yes, we've got the panel. They're about to join us now. So the way we're going to work through the rest of the session is that the three panelists will now join us. And together with Patrick, we will have further conversation about the opportunity in this area. So I can see Leigh has popped up on the screen. I've got Sheila, and I should have Nigel jumping on the screen too. Is Nigel not joining yet? No? Okay. Leigh Howard, my colleague from Southeast Asia, as our Deputy Trade Commissioner there. Leigh, if I can hand over to you just to let us know, you know, what is your take on the topic we're discussing? Just a couple of minutes from you, then I'll hand over to Sheila.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarah, and hi everyone. Great to be with you. And I'd also tip my hat to Patrick's presentation. I think it was a great summary and picked up on some really key points that ring true based on our experience here on the ground. So I'm coming to you from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It's turning out to be a very sunny day as the sun rises here. And as Sara said earlier in her opening remarks, Kuala Lumpur is part of our international Victorian Government Trade Investment Network. In Southeast Asia, we have 4 offices, our latest office being Vietnam. And that's no coincidence that we'd be adding to the network in Southeast Asia. This is a rapidly growing region, but it's also a region that's gaining more and more attention. And I say that because of, I guess, some of the shifts away from traditional markets and where people have sometimes looked for their commercial engagements. And I think a lot of Australian businesses and definitely Victorian businesses are looking to Southeast Asia during this period, and it just seems to be gaining a lot of momentum. In Southeast Asia, really the story is one of rapid urbanisation and increasing affluence. And I think that's the sort of the relevant backdrop to the discussion today, that in Southeast Asia, we have a population of 660 million people. That's a moving target. You almost have to check your numbers every time you're giving a presentation to see if it's gone up by another 10 million. But, you know, half and a growing number of those people are living in urban areas. And that's really putting some real challenges on the infrastructure and the supply of some of those areas that Patrick touched on, you know, energy, waste, and particularly water. I'm in Kuala Lumpur. It's a main city. It's a capital city. It's a very sophisticated city. It rains every second day, if not every day, and we have water challenges, which is really an issue that the local authorities have to deal with and are really grappling with. So I know this is just the introduction, so I'm going to pause there and hand over to the other panelists to introduce themselves. But I'm really looking forward to interacting in this session today.
Thank you, Leigh. Thank you very, very much. Great to have you here today. If I can hand over to Sheila. Sheila Lunter is Austrade's Trade Commissioner for the Pacific and Timor-Leste. Sheila, we'd love to hear from you a couple of minutes, introducing yourself and just letting us know what your take on this is.
Thank you, Sara, and it's a pleasure to be joining you. And thanks again to the organisers for being invited on this this panel. Like Leigh, I'm really looking forward to it. So I'm coming to you from Melbourne, even though I cover the Pacific, but I hope to actually be heading out to Fiji in a couple of weeks' time and be on the ground there. Obviously, the Pacific is going through quite a difficult time at the moment, as the borders have been closed for the last year pretty much. And the Pacific is a bit of a different situation if you compare it to Southeast Asia. I would say there are similar challenges, but the way that we're working in the Pacific is slightly different. So much of it is coming from multilateral funders, so the banks, but also bilateral aid, and there is a strong emphasis on infrastructure. There's a lot of aging infrastructure, particularly in water and wastewater facilities. We actually did a webinar yesterday on opportunities in that space in the Pacific. There's a lot of work going on there, but there's also a real drive to put in a lot of renewable energy projects into the Pacific. If you look at the amount of funding that's actually going in, we're seeing, you know, $3 billion US dollars annually coming from the ADB. The World Bank has about $600 million annually in aid funding going in, and Australia has its own Australia Infrastructure Financing Facility for the Pacific that is going to be funding around 2 billion Australian dollars over the next 4 to 5 years. That is partially in loans. The majority of that is in loans and partially in grants. Those are feeding into projects that are great opportunities for many companies, not necessarily as a head contractor, but often as a subcontractor. And the region is of course, whilst the islands are very small, the distances are enormous. And it goes back to the point that Patrick made in his introduction, that logistics are a real issue in the Pacific. They're costly and they really need to be factored in. Also, the energy and the telecom available right now need to be factored in. So there's challenges to enter the market, but there's also a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of linkages, and Australia and Australian technology is deeply appreciated and welcomed in the Pacific, because a lot of Pacific Islanders have studied in Australia. They're familiar with Australian product, and they like to see those standards in the Pacific in their own countries. So we'll probably go into this more about what makes, you know, a successful approach in the Pacific, because I can talk about that for a long time. But it's a slightly different region. It's challenging, but it's got great benefits, and there are great opportunities there right now. And I might just leave it there so that we have enough time for Nigel also.
That's wonderful, Sheila. Thank you so much. It was great to hear your insights, and yes, looking forward to hearing more views from you when we open up to the panel. Last but not least, great to have Nigel Murphy joining us today. Nigel's the Director of Earth Systems, and he's also the Chair of the Cleantech Cluster. Nigel, welcome. We'd love to hear from you. Just some early framing remarks on this session and how it's going to go.
Yes, thanks. Thanks very much, Sara. And look, I echo the words of Patrick and Sheila and Leigh. My experience is as a director of an environmental engineering and science company exporting products and services. And we've worked in over 30 countries, actually, in Asia, Africa, the Pacific and Europe. And I think, you know, Australia has this tremendous natural advantage. It's well regarded through its multicultural population. It has a lot of linkages to export markets, and there's probably a lot more exporting that we could do. A lot more companies in Australia could certainly export, and particularly in our clean tech sector. I think one of the key things to bear in mind is that each place has its own characteristics, and you need to understand the culture. You need to respect the government, the institutional frameworks, and you know. So, for example, in Asia, we already have strong linkages. We're close to those markets, Europe and North America, they're huge markets, but there's huge competition in those markets. Africa, we have similar landscapes. And so, you know, a lot of what we do here is applicable in Africa. So you have to understand the local dynamics. And it's tempting to jump onto the India and China bandwagons, but they are very difficult markets because they're very competitive in price. And unless you can offer something which is going to you know, meet those market expectations, it's difficult. So exporting is very nuanced, and you need to be able to not reinvent the wheel, but build off the experiences that Austrade and Global Victoria and other companies and organisations have had in the market. And honestly, that's really one of the key values of the Victorian Cleantech cluster, is to help provide pathways to organisations that are seeking to export into new markets, because there are a lot of pitfalls and bear traps if you're not careful. So I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely, Nigel. You make some really good points there. I can tell you that collectively as a panel, you're already giving lots of gold. If you've seen my eyes darting, there's been a flurry of questions already coming through, part and parcel with you know, probably how well versed the audience is with using this particular platform. So I will come to those questions in good time. But thank you one and all for your contributions to date. We're now going to open up the conversation. So just a reminder, we're in Thriving and Driving Exports, and our session is all about the opportunities and pitfalls of exporting. So thank you for the questions already. So I might kick off with the first one. COVID-19, this pandemic has severely disrupted travel all over the world, and it's made it difficult to enter new markets. So have you seen in your experiences any different approaches that people have been adopting to make sure that we're, you know, still engaging internationally? I'm open to anyone that wants to take that question.
I'll jump in, Sarah, on that one.
Thanks, Leigh.
Absolutely. What they say, necessity is the mother of invention. I think you know, there's a lot of companies and a lot of people were looking at how do they work virtually. Do people work from home? How do we connect with clients and colleagues around the world? And COVID-19, as unfortunate as it is, has given everyone that push where they are engaging virtually. There is no choice. And people often talk about, you know, the doing business in Asia guides and the cultural requirements of going to eat together and all of these in-person elements. Well, those are off the table. Those are off the table even domestically. So we're all in this together. In Southeast Asia, I would see firms definitely engaging virtually. I would have always encouraged exporters or aspirational exporters to be looking to keep up their marketing efforts and their digital sort of communication efforts on an ongoing basis. I think that particularly for clean tech, it's one of those sectors where you need to create a lot of awareness, because you never know when your moment's going to come, when those doors are going to open and the opportunities really exist, because this is a very, very long sales cycle in some instances. So I do think constant reaching out, I do think finding a way to keep communicating your existence and your presence and your availability as an exporter or a solution provider is key. And doing that virtually is certainly a way to go. So I'd encourage firms to not hesitate to reach out. I think the whole world's a lot more proficient in Zoom and Teams and other apps, but also keeping up your digital communications as well as sort of as a backdrop to everything that you're doing.
I might jump in too, Sara, because
Thanks, Sheila.
I fully agree with Leigh that virtual is the way to go, and it certainly has been for the last year. But I would say that I'm seeing two things unfolding in the Pacific. So on the one hand, you have companies who have really good skilled local staff and have invested in building those skills in the staff, and they've been able to continue operations, because you're talking about infrastructure that needs maintenance. So having engineers on the ground is crucial to the ability of maintaining that equipment there. So if you've invested in staff, that's going to be of benefit to you. But on the other hand, I also see companies now that are starting to factor in the fact that they will need to actually do quarantine and calculate that time in both going out and going in. Because I think what we've seen when it first started, everyone was hopefully thinking it would only be a couple of weeks, then a couple of months, and now we are a year on, we got vaccines rolling out, and we're still not able to travel. And it is starting to bite, because whilst you can survive for a while, not getting people into the market, at some point you need to start, reshaping your model, and you need to start rethinking that. I was talking with a company the other day. Whilst they would normally send people in on shift for 28 days into Pacific markets, they are now sending them in for 11 weeks. That is 7 weeks in location and 4 weeks, so 2 weeks on either end, in quarantine. That's pretty tough for families and the engineers that are going up that way. It's the only way to do it. And that means it also needs to be factored into the cost that you sort of ask for delivering the project. So these are all considerations that need to be thought of.
Thank you for those insights. Patrick and Nigel, if you want to chime in, please do. If not, I'll move to the next question, which is going to be directed to you, Patrick.
Just an observation that it does depend a little bit on the nature of the business. So digital clean tech businesses have had a slightly easier pathway because, they can transmit software. Obviously, if it's a physical clean tech solution, then exactly what's been described as, we're moving towards a sort of hybrid world where, the early sales introductions, the early conversations are on platforms, but you have to physically get there at some point, or you've got to invest in recruiting somebody locally who understands what you're doing. So we are, I think, moving towards these hybrid solutions, but digital businesses, they have some advantages in the current environment.
Thanks for that, Patrick. Nigel,
I'd just add Sheila's point about, having people on the ground. So we have people in the ground in Africa and Asia, and it's actually probably been a competitive advantage for us because many of our competitors can't get there. I think the other thing that's important is the collaboration. So work out which companies actually do have a presence in those countries where you want to operate during COVID times. Maybe they can help you. Maybe they can do some things for you during this difficult period to travel. So I think that's where collaboration is important.
I agree with you, Nigel. I really do think people have already had presence in overseas in markets were at a clear advantage versus the others. But aren't we all just hoping and praying that the world does get on top of this virus and we can open up again the way we're celebrating we opened up with across the Trans-Tasman this week? So fingers crossed we will see that continuum change from virtual to physical sooner than perhaps we can imagine. My next question is for you, Patrick. It's a good question, actually. How strong should a domestic operation be before they consider going overseas and exporting?
Wow, that is a good question. Look, I think in most geographies, and most of my work is in Asia Pac, there is interest in what companies have done in their own environment, So, I think you need to at least be at the stage where you've got some customers and you've demonstrated a commercial model and tested it, and you have some referenceable sites or referenceable customers that people can contact to get familiar with what you're doing. So I think you've got to have that element in place. Having said that, customers are often assuming that it will be a very different scenario on the ground in their own environment, and they'll be looking for proof of concept in their own, physical environment, whether it's dust or heat or different climate. So I think I wouldn't delay going internationally, but I think it's important that you can point to some reference sites, you can demonstrate that it works, and that there's some people to talk to. But I wouldn't stay in the domestic market too long because the opportunities are so large offshore. You can learn different lessons in those markets. What I do think is important is that you've got your customer support and channel support resources in place to do a good job of following through. Often Australian companies expose themselves a bit early in markets and they're not resourced up to respond to the inquiries that follow. Often quite detailed, good questions. They're not able to respond to them, and they're not resourced enough to support that. So I think in terms of domestic capacity, just having that ability to support partners and customers, that's an important piece as well.
I think there's some really good advice there. In fact, I don't know that it's unique to this subject matter. I think it's. I think I'll be playing this recording to many Victorian organisations. But yeah, we do need to inspire more confidence across Victorian capability and Victorian exporters. I agree. Thank you. Would anybody else like to volunteer some comments along on that question? Or if not, I'll go for it, Sheila.
Yeah, I might just mention, because a few years ago I was working on the landing pads program as well that Austrade runs, and we always looked at sort of, you know, companies' ability to scale up. Because if the demand comes, are you able to deliver on it? So they needed to be a little bit further along the spectrum than just that initial startup, but actually have the ability to, particularly as we were considering with landing pads, whether people could spend some time overseas in a landing pad, they needed to have somebody who could run the business onshore whilst they were pursuing new opportunities offshore. And I think that's valid advice for any company. You need to be able to sort of, you know, diversify your attention. And by the way, it's still a great opportunity, Austrade landing pads, even if companies can't travel physically. They're running a lot of virtual boot camps, and I would recommend people to sort of look out for those. They are tremendous value, and offer some you know, some good ways of working on things, on building knowledge and getting ready for export for when the opportunity to present itself again to travel overseas.
Sheila, is that information that the audience can easily find on the Austrade website?
Yes, it should be available there, and certainly also it usually gets advertised on LinkedIn, so, and through other mediums, through social media. So it's definitely out there. I'll look up the link for that and send it. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. If I can direct the next question to you, Nigel. Somebody is asking, what tips do you have for Victorian companies looking to export, and what surprising challenge, which we have sort of touched on already, but the second half of the question is what I think maybe we can focus on. So let me just find it again. What surprising challenges did you face and overcome?
Yeah, look, I think the main tip is to collaborate with groups that have been there and done that, and also to look at what your product offering is and identify the best jurisdictions to push into, because some jurisdictions aren't right for certain things, and it's tempting to follow what you think is the biggest market, but it might also be the hardest market. So sometimes it's better to go into a smaller market where there's less competition to start off with, and build your knowledge and credentials as an exporter. So that's probably been my main tip. And in terms of, you know, what are the surprising challenges that you face and overcome? Well, I think there's always surprises, but I mean, I think, you know, an example may be to Europe. If you've got a product going to Europe, you need to meet European certification. It's costly. There's also taxes into the European market, so that's, you know, that's costly. So it makes it a little bit difficult exporting into some markets. And other markets, they might have a withholding tax, which means that instead of it being profitable to do the work, it might not be profitable. So sometimes there's devil in the detail, and that can challenge you. But I think what can overcome that is learning and working with people that are there. I mean, here in Victoria, here in Australia, we're covering the world. So there's certain to be people that have expertise that can help you in new markets, and hopefully identify and solve a problem before it becomes a major challenge.
Absolutely, you're spot on there, Nigel. It is quite surprising the regulatory challenges that you face when you set up operations in another country. It's not, often it's not straightforward, and often the regulatory environment can change the goalposts on you whilst you're midway through your establishment program. If I can stay with you just for a moment, Nigel, another question's come through, and let me just zoom back. If the VCC was to arrange a mission to a high prospect market, in which market should we start, and which problem sectors offer the greatest opportunity, and why?
Well, I like to think of competitive advantage. What competitive advantage do we have? So if you're looking at, say, Victoria, for example, well, we have one of the cleanest, greenest, well-organised cities in the world, one of the most livable cities in Melbourne. So that's a competitive advantage. So we should take those competitive advantages out to the global marketplace. Another issue Australia has is we are a very dry continent, and so we have water is very precious for us, and that helps build innovation. We also have a lot of sunshine, so we have a lot of renewable energy. We have a multicultural, as I said, workplace. So what I think we need to do is take our competitive advantages to the marketplace. And quite frankly, I wouldn't just focus on India and China. There's a lot of countries in Southeast Asia. We've had an operation in Laos PDR for the last 20 years. It's a very small country, but we've done a lot of work. It's enabled us to work with the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, bring in clients and opportunities that we could never have had just being in Australia, or if we were in Canada, or if we were in Europe. So I think a great place to start is Southeast Asia is a great place to start, and I think Africa is an incredible opportunity. There are many countries there, many similarities in landscape. Australians are well received, so they're probably two areas, Southeast Asia and Africa, which I think where great opportunities would be created. And if you do want to work for groups like the World Bank, great places to start.
Thank you for that, Nigel. I'm delighted with the way this session is going. Your insights have just been amazing. And I just feel like the audience is getting richer, just nugget after nugget of gold being dropped on, because you're giving very practical advice here. So very practical and very sound advice. I believe we've only got time for one more question. If I may direct this one to you, Patrick, and invite the rest of the panel to contribute as well. But Patrick, when I think about a sector like this, and when I think about this particular forum that's been running the last 3 days, who is excelling around the world? Who is delivering the gold standard? Is there any one particular nation that we should be learning from right now?
Oh, wow. Across the whole clean tech field, of course, that's going to vary quite a bit. You can look at Israel, for solutions relating to agriculture, and water recycling. That's a strong player in that space. Smart cities, yeah, Melbourne's right up there, and I think, we are in a position that we can look at what makes the cities smart, the technologies, and also, I guess, the governance and the way they're managed, energy, look, we should be leaders in energy. We have the capacity to be, as we know, an exporter of hydrogen, to do very large-scale solar generation. And we have a lot of smart grid technologies. And one of the reasons for that, and we do have, I think, an advantage in that area, is that, with the way our consumer take-up of solar has happened, our grid has come under pressure a lot earlier than it has in most countries. We're well ahead of the Americans in terms of, grid resilience solutions, etc. So that's an area, again, that we actually have some potential. So it's kind of, it really kind of depends on the particular problem in the tech as to where we stand and who the leaders are. But I think there's some of the areas that we actually are right up there.
You make me feel like I'm standing a foot taller right now, Patrick. I love hearing about how Victoria is all kinds of awesome. I know, you're talking about some Australian capability as well, but I do feel, very proud of when I do hear the credentials that we can boast for the state. Would anybody else like to add on to Patrick's comments there?
I think you sort of see usually gold standard in sectors where we are strong traditionally. So, mining, Australia is very good in mining equipment and technology, and the same in agriculture, which was mentioned by Patrick. But also I found in sort of, the experiences I've had overseas that we can sometimes be surprised by some other countries that you wouldn't expect. And I've had the privilege of working in Israel, and yes, I'm very aware of the capability there. But I had never expected that Italy, is the country that is the birthplace of one of the largest renewable energy providers in the world, Enel. And I mean, I didn't know that before going there, and I think very few people know that. So sometimes I think you got to keep an open mind, and because you might be surprised on who's really strong. And I think that goes back to, you've got to network and you've got to listen. You've got to have your ear on the ground and find out what's going on in a marketplace and who's doing the main business there.
Thank you for that, Sheila. Look, I'm really sorry. We've actually gone over time, and there have been lots more questions that we haven't been able to address. But I want to thank you, Patrick, Mooney, Leigh Howard, Sheila Lunter, and Nigel Murphy. Thank you, because clearly we do have a great story to tell. You've illustrated quite clearly for us that Victoria is a leader in this clean tech sector, and I just hope that all the participants and the organisations that do have ambition to export, that you do know there's an army ready to support you. Well, not an army literally, but there are lots of people around the world at the federal level with Austrade, at the state level with Global Victoria, that are ready to hear what your ambition is and to help and guide you with some of these really solid principles that have been shared here by the panellists. So thank you one and all for your time today. Thank you for the privilege to be here and listen to each and every one of you speak. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Cleantech Expo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Take care.